Let's get this meeting started. We're on the record.
Today and tomorrow.
And this is Sunday work session. With Zig, we're speaking to him. Let's go around the room and identify ourselves for the record.
Scott, you start.
Scott Lee in Colorado.
Pete Peterson, Assembly.
Felix, say your name.
Felix Rivera.
Dick
John.
Traney.
John Weddleton.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Dee Ennis, Department of Law.
Alden Thurn, Deputy City Manager.
Holden, you want to make a comment first?
Sure. I'm just scared by having the benefits director and the OMB director here, but that's in an hour, the next meeting. So anyway, thank you all for showing up on this particular floor. I just wanted to let everybody know that going forward for at least the next 3 months, your meetings will be up here. We've kind of sequestered room 155 downstairs. That is our new training, our testing lab, so to speak. We moved the computers in there from Sunshine. So we are trying to get out of the Sunshine building by the end of July, which was our plan all along, and I think you did an extension to get the lease through that time period. We've moved HCM and OCM to the 6th and 7th floors already. Testing lab is moved into your room downstairs, and then we're going to be moving the rest of the people over the next couple of weeks here into this building. That'll get us out of there by the end of July. We are doing it for 3 major reasons. We're doing the move on the testing lab right now because we are on schedule to finally deliver data 6 weeks late. We will make that. We will start SIT 3 on the 10th, and I didn't want to move the lab right in the middle of SIT testing, so that's why we moved it ahead of time and got it over there so that the Philo people can move in and can do their testing on the 10th when it starts. We also want to embed the consultants as close to the SMEs that are there, so we lose that transportation and time back and forth. When we do go live, we want them side by side addressing issues. So starting them and having this building is one thing. And we are trying to be as fiscally responsible as possible, even if it's a little bit of money wherever we do it, to get out of a building that we're leasing and get into this particular facility. So appreciate your understanding, and we are in the process, if we haven't rekeying that, so that we can maintain the security of the equipment that happens to be in that room. I don't have the keys yet, but that is what we're moving towards, and appreciate you changing your schedules and all your meetings for at least the next 3 months to accommodate that. Thank you.
Just want to let everybody know why.
How many people are moving people?
Oh boy, we're probably, in the end, we're going to be moving approximately 40 to 50 people are being moved in. The computer lab had 30 computers, 20 have been moved over. I'm debating whether or not to pay $1,500 to add additional circuits to that room to add the other 10. So I'm in process to trying to, even $1,500, I'm trying not to do.
We'll add the circuits. We always appreciate having more circuits.
But and they would put some more outlets in. So I'm waiting to get Abbott's approval on that just to make sure that was the right decision. But we're also looking at maybe taking over the credit union that's leaving. I need lots of space, and that's also on the agenda here. And meeting rooms will get tight in the building. Once we get done with testing, however, which is probably in the August time period, then we might be able to use that room a little bit more. But we are trying to be fiscally responsible, but on the same time, we're cramming everybody into it, and we're doing our best we can across the board, and this is one example.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to jump
credit
in.
Union, it depends on who you talk. The credit union people say the city threw them out. The city says the credit union wanted to move. It depends. It's one of these things who you ask.
Mr. Chair, can
Yes,
I
ma'am.
add something? Just so you know, since we've changed all of these meetings, this means committee meetings and work sessions for the rest of the year. You're getting tons of Outlook email requests from our office. Please just look at the email requests, accept them if you have to, delete them if you're not available. Though the one thing that I can tell you, you should probably not decline a meeting, just delete it. If you decline a meeting, it goes to everybody, and I don't think you want that. So anyway, that's sort of what's going on and why you're getting inundated with emails from the clerk's office. The good news is if you accept it or just leave it, when your mobile device or your calendar is just going to have the correct location for that room on it. It'll have 8:30 instead of 1:55.
Go ahead, Zig. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Alden, for keeping that succinct.
It's about as good as you're going to get from me.
Okay, let's move on. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the overall project progress. The first thing I guess I wanted to talk about is that if you recall, I've been saying for the last 3 months or so that the project needed to be replanned, that the team has been requesting from SAP a replan, because everybody knew 3 months ago they weren't going to make July 3rd. And so that's been going on. So it's finally now, it was provided to the team 2 weeks ago, and then there were some adjustments made to it after it was looked at, and this is now, you're going to see the second iteration, and it still has things that needs to be cleaned up. But some things that have happened is that user acceptance testing is probably not going to occur. The team understands that. I mean, that's been part of, but that's a way for us to ensure that we're going to get to 10.1. So SIT 3 in essence is going to become user acceptance testing. Performance testing is a big question. I've had it. I know Alden's had it. So why in the world is it even there? Because we have a contract with SAP to operate the system. I'm not sure we understand why we need to check performance. So that's being reduced. The other thing that we noticed in the plan is there's really not a lot of consistency in SAP estimating what is necessary from MOA. Okay, so especially in areas like validating the conversion and validating the test results, that requires people's time, and they're being burned out on that right now, yet it's not included in the plan. And then lastly, the post-go live, which is in the contract for 20 days, basically the team has agreed and said, we don't really need you here for that, we don't want to pay for it. Yes, sir.
So if I could just add a comment to that. I think they've removed it from the plan, which is what he's referring to. There is still, we have it in the contract for them to do it. We're working on some stuff right now. There will be a new change order for post-go-live support with SAP. They just removed it from the plan because the plan goes up to go-live, which is what the capital money is being spent on, and then there will be, I don't want to mislead you, that it has been dropped in the plan, but they're still planning on being here at least for the first 20 days in doing the work.
Go ahead, Zig.
So some good news, I think, is that an awful lot of the activities that, when targeting July 1, those activities were not going to get done. And so there was a long list of some things that were going to occur post-go live. Okay? Well, as soon as you extend this to October, Alden was able to bring those into the project. So that's the good news. So all of a sudden, some things that specifically were post-go live were the 10 CAFR reports. That's been moved in now. There were 29 critical reports we talked about as being post-go live. They are now being developed. Okay, and in ECM, is kind of having some troubles getting completed, and so that's now focused as well. That's the good news. But we must remember that MOA has to be willing to accept the degree of thoroughness, which is going to ease up a little bit. It's not going to be quite there, but the functionality will be there. So basically I'm saying that you've got to be willing to take about a 90% solution rather than 100%. Okay? Otherwise, you're not going to make 10-1. Go ahead. So here's what the plan looks like. Don't expect you to see it, but it is hard copy. You can take a look at it. Now, the plan, the way it was provided by SAP, does not have any of this. This is hidden. Very frustrating for me. I don't understand why they keep doing that. Okay? The other thing that was hidden was this column. Now I say hidden because I didn't add those. I didn't create data. I just simply unhid it. Unhid, however that word goes. I just
Revealed.
Thank you. Revealed this column. And I revealed the bar charts, which are in the system. They're in there. Okay? So this is what the plan looks like. I also then summarized it so we can fit it on one piece of paper. Let me go to the next page. Now, so immediately you start seeing some anomalies when you look at this. Here's today, or actually 2 days ago. That's supposed to be done. That says there's 0 hours planned. an anomaly. The one up there, supposed to be done. See the circle? That says it's only 38% complete. That means there's work to be done. Okay? I've got some 0% completes, things that were supposed to be started in May. I find that an anomaly. I find that odd. Okay? So that kind of thing, so I'm starting looking up here. If you look at the CAFR reports, I mean, it says 0% complete. Yet this morning, you have a CAFR comment?
We actually have finished some of the CAP for functional specs and are beginning to develop them. So what in the conversation with Zig is that while the plan shows 0, they're actually making progress. So it goes back to the validity of this or the accuracy of this, and it goes back to SAP spending the amount of time on a daily/weekly basis to keep it updated. You can create a plan, and this plan is thousands of lines to begin with, but unless you actually daily manage it, it's never going to be
It's out of
accurate.
date from
The moment you put it out, yeah, the moment it was there, because I don't believe that they do a good enough job going in and continuing keeping it updated. What he's referring to is, as you've seen from me, is those daily metrics. I force them to keep that updated on a daily basis,
But
but the
it's not
plan,
reflected here.
but the plan doesn't get its
And
updated
it
nearly
should
as
be, by
fast.
the way. It should be, that is part of the job, because part of the contract says they're supposed to maintain the plan.
We've been joined by Eric Croft for the record. Hi, Eric.
So, and then, just in terms of how you look at this, this says there's 2,332 tasks in this plan. Here, just get compressed. Let's go to the next page. So some of the concerns with regard to this approach and this plan, we have to recognize that if we're talking about a 90% solution, some of those reports, like the CAFR, will get developed. They probably won't get tested. They don't have enough time. Okay? We already saw, Howard made the comment about post-go live support. May not have SAP involved, depends on the contract and how that gets worked out. So some of the functionality may not pass SIT 3, and we talked last time about how some things are moving and being shifted from SIT 1 that got moved to SIT 2, which meant that it was the second cycle of integration testing, and it was being hit or noticed the first time instead of the second time. And now we have this possibility that several of the things may very well not go through in SIT 3 because it's the first time looking at that particular test cycle. So we have to be aware of that. Okay? So here are the deal breakers. What potentially could happen to say we just can't go live on 10.1? We need to pay attention to those. They need to be monitored, and they need to be mitigated, and they need to be solved, whatever the case may be. But we need to be aware. So if payroll fails, you do not want to turn the system on. You do not. Period. End of story. So we need to be paying attention to this. Now, as Alden said, he's been getting daily status reports. He's been really beating on them. And the news is pretty good for the first 2 cycles. And the third cycle is actually looking pretty good. I'll show you that in just a second. And, they're actually talking about letting some of the HCM consultants take off early from the project. So they're pretty confident, and that's good. Okay? Supplier relationship management, fancy word for the purchasing cycle. Okay? There have been multiple reconfigurations of that of SRM in the last 6 months. Okay? Things have not gone all that well. Okay? The major concern is the shopping cart is not working. The shopping cart is where you go in and literally, it's just like Amazon. Just like Amazon, where you buy things and you dump it in there and then you can go empty the cart and pay for it, right? Not working.
Well, Zig, you said we needed to have some code changes for that, but the administration now says there's no code changes that need to be done.
Most of this is configuration issues. Most of it is the pointers between various activities in the system. And now we go back to the conversations we've had about how complex SAP is. You push something down here, something goes up over here. I mean, those kinds of things happen all the time. The supplier relationship management has got linkages all over the place. Inventory, receivables, payables, invoicing. I mean, they're just all over the place. and you make a mistake in the way you set up the configuration of the pointers, something doesn't work.
Alden?
I think he answered a different question than what you had asked. There are no code changes, I believe, in purchasing that he's mentioned in the past that need to go through the assembly. They're going to be policy changes. Zig was referring to
Policy procedure manual changes.
internal things that they have to be able to do that. Zig was mentioning, I think, that, or was answering a question with regards, we have had a lot of struggles in SRM and how important SRM is throughout the entire organization because it hits everything. I will make a comment on this. We are aware of it. We have lots of meetings, and we're going to end up bringing in probably 3 more people just to handle that particular area to help out over the next 5 to 8 weeks to ensure that we get there. We still have 3 months, by the way, before we go live, but it's not where it needs to be, and we're probably going to have 5 total people working on just this thing over the next month to try to get it cleaned up. But Zig's comments earlier were absolutely accurate with the fact that, some of we will maybe only get it through once to make sure that it works, and then before we go live, and our preference would have gone through it a couple of times to make sure, and that's where we are, because of the shortening of the schedule now to hit our date. We're not going to have the functionality. We're going to do everything we possibly can to make it happen, and we'll test it once, and then we might be going live, and we would have rather maybe tested more than that, and we're just not going to have that opportunity.
Mr. Chairman, so these 5 people, have you located them? Are
Well,
they going to be hired? Or?
We have, one is our current SRM person. They've also brought the manager of their entire company. He's on their dime, has been up here 3 solid weeks helping out. That's another one. Another one we're going to bring on that they are currently interviewing for, and I was just told this morning they're going to bring a whole nother person on their dime to be able to help out in SRM. But what that does show is SRM is a concern to everybody, and we still have a ways to go on that, and we're gonna try to get the thing working and resolved, but it would have been the purchasing department is, of course, apprehensive because, getting it to work on August 12th and then you turn it on the 13th doesn't give them a whole lot of comfort. So, but we are trying to get the resources there to be able to address whatever the remaining concerns are.
And we always need to remind everybody on the team, and I think they know this, is if this doesn't work, you don't turn the system on. I mean, you buy too many things, okay? The third deal breaker is grants. This has been the area that's caused them probably the most consistent data issues for the team for the last 5 months, 6 months?
Since last September.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a constant thorn in everybody's side. This is the area that is not in PeopleSoft. The data doesn't reside in PeopleSoft. It resides in spreadsheets. A lot of loosey-goosey kind of activities go on when you have something in a spreadsheet because you don't have controls, you don't have edits. I mean, you can have bad data. I mean, all kinds of issues. So there's been a lot of redesign, and they keep making changes. They've also had staffing changes, so you get different staff now focusing on grants from the muni side. So there have been multiple reconfigurations over the last 3 months. And again, it's a lot like purchasing. It touches almost everything. So you've got all this configuration, all these pointers going back and forth with regard to, actual spending, budget, control, projects. All are tied into where does this grant money go? Where is it being used? How is it being tracked? Does that make sense? So again, it's a deal breaker. Somebody has got to say enough is enough. If we've got 90% of the data and we're satisfied with it, we need to say stop, go forward. That's what has to happen right now. So you will see my suggestion a little bit later. On the next one.
Question from another?
Okay. So just as a reminder, this came out of the SAP QA report, January 2015. All right, and SAP looked at all of the modules, and they determined what the completion risk was. Okay, and here's the definition, their definition of what the completion risk is. All I wanted to mention is that nothing that's causing us a problem right now is considered to be a high risk. And in fact, I don't see the word high on there at all. Okay, so SAP thinks these are doable. We just need to be aware of that, okay? although supplier relationship management's a little higher risk than grants, which is low. Now, the product, the modules for grants are fine, it's the data. Okay, let's go on. We wanted to just talk a little bit about payroll. I just want to let you know, yes, things are looking up. And, you know, the good news, here's what's happening with the reconciliation and the validation. It's gotten right up to where it should be. Excellent. And we're here, so they're moving along quite well. I think that's the message. So the third cycle for payroll parallel is doing very well.
And that's a 50 cents variance.
That's what you told us.
Yeah.
It went from $5 to $2.50, and this is a 50-cent variance.
Okay? I also, because earlier, I think maybe you were talking about, has anybody run these tests from time to paycheck? And the answer is yes, they have. So we've got a lot of interfaces here, which includes time and pay. And we've also got some, though, that we still have to work on, which are the benefit side, which is the interfaces to the external insurance companies and so forth. That's still to be done.
And the state of Alaska retirement system, which is kicking our butt because they have not been ready to. They mandated the change, and then they haven't been ready. Didn't make their own systems ready to accept the changes. So we incorporated the change, haven't been able to test it because they don't have an environment to receive them, and yet they told us we had to be ready on July 1st or January 1st.
Okay, let's go. So we've already talked about this first point. Alden mentioned the fact that they're bringing in resources that are specialty SRM resources specifically to take care of the concerns. But I also found out when I talked to the SAP folks, they are actually going to prioritize which scripts get run early in the process over the next few weeks. And SRM is definitely going to be in play. So they're going to give themselves as much time as possible to fix whatever they have to fix. Okay? And I think that I've said all of this. The grants, issue with the data has got to stop. They've got to basically say enough is enough. Let's move on. The Pareto principle is that you've only got 20% of the data approximately that has to be cleared up, and it's going to cause 80% of the issue. It's going to cause this project to delay. Okay, so I would suggest the chief financial officer needs to step up and basically concur and say enough is enough.
Alden, comments?
I'm not the CFO of the organization. We cannot timeline handle any more additional process or functional or process changes with the way they are. Right now, all we need to focus on is making sure the data is current as possible, but we cannot handle any more changes in the formatting of that data.
Has the CFO been told that?
I don't think to the level that you're asking. I can tell you the entire executive steering committee and the mayor are well aware of our challenges we've had over the last year in that area, because all of our data delays have initiated because of that particular entity, and then it's flow through across everything else after that. So
You only get a certain percentage, and you try to get the last 10%, and drive yourself nuts trying to do it.
The people are so dedicated. They want to be. I mean, this is not a bad thing. They want the municipality to get. They paid a lot for this system. They want it to be perfect, and we can absolutely understand that methodology. But given the time frame that we're trying to push right now and because of the big picture financially, we have to make some cutoffs. And every one of these files that we load, it might be. I saw one. Initially, it was 5,000 records, and 3,500 were wrong. And we took 4 days, and we got it to 9. And it was going to take 2 more days to get those 9 done, and we said, we can't afford those 2 days. The 9, we're locking it down, you're going to have to fix them later. And it's like that on every single file that we have. There is a point where we reach and we say we don't have any additional time. And but they're so passionate. And these people, to get from where they were, they've been up at 2 a.m. working 20-hour days. They want it to be perfect, but it gets very frustrating when we say that's as much time as we can allocate because of the big picture, and they still have 9 left, and they're not happy. And it's unfortunate, but it's across the board on every file. There's no perfection on any file. There's always something that still gets to be there, and we just have to try to do our best to reassure them that we understand where we're at, but big picture wise, we have to be able to, this is the target that we're shooting for.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about what the project team is basically saying for the next slide. You've seen this. I try to keep track every week of how this is progressing. Overall, the project continues to be red because they simply have not made any of their target dates. A lot of variation in here. HCM continues to be relatively positive throughout, so there has not been too much of a blip there. The concerning area, without a doubt, is right here. I said it last month, I'll say it again. But the reason why Philo is red, a lot of reasons, but the big piece, the big chunk, purchasing's in there. Okay? Purchasing's in there. Now, the other thing I find strange is how is it that reports can say they're green? Everything's fine. Well, they weren't even going to do Catherine until a few weeks ago. And they're not going to test them, so I don't know how this can be green. But
Yes, Forrest, go ahead.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Zig, so I apologize if I'm jumping ahead here and you're going to explain this later, but to me, the thing that's most interesting about this chart, besides the normal doomsday prediction, is if you look at OCM and ECM, we've gone from red to yellow, which is the first positive sign we've had in a while. Can you explain why that is, or are you
Sure.
about to?
absolutely.
And is that as big a deal as it seems?
It is. I mean, several things happened. First of all, they replaced the person who was running OCM. Okay, so we have a new project manager there. That person, then very quickly resolved some of the things that had to be done in terms of scope of effort. He was able to successfully move some things out of scope so that he was able to get things done. And he also got people actually writing and developing. So that's why he changed it to yellow, and I accept that. I think it's pretty decent. Okay.
Okay.
I don't think it's green. I mean, because but it's definitely an improvement over. Gee, we have to reschedule and we're in trouble.
Remind me what ECM stands for?
Is Enterprise Content Management. So that's the scanning of documents and attaching them to records in SAP.
Okay. On that, we've also gone from red to yellow.
Yeah, well, the reason that this went red is because they stopped working. There was an issue of contracts and.
We ran out of hours. They ran out of hours to do the work.
Forrest?
No.
But that's why they're back working, and that's why it's a good thing.
Sorry that I was late and sorry I was slow on the, so on the grants activity and the CFO issue, really we're making more than minor changes to our scope, to the design, to what's expected?
If you go back to the very beginning, we didn't have all the grants in there, then they've added more grants, and then we've changed structurally how that information was going to be mapped and brought into SAP multiple times. And every time you do that,
Sure.
it changes projects, budgets, profit and loss, and all those linkages. Because if you remember, almost all of Philo is not in PeopleSoft. It's in spreadsheets. So it's all manual changes. So when you change it, and they change it because they believe that this is the information that they need to have on grants. So they're not doing it to stop the project. They're doing it to try to be more complete, more accurate, and get all the information they need. But what it does is it affects everything downstream, and then our timelines just get massively changed because they all have to change all of their crosswalks and all of their efforts that they have to be able to do. What Zig is saying is we did change it again for Mach 3, a couple of week delay to begin this process was because of that, and that whatever format that we have grants in right now, that's the format that we're going live with, and then they should not be allowed to go and say, oh, we now want to add fields or change things or anything like that, because we do not have the time remaining to have all the other departments redo all of their work because of that initial change.
So you're saying you're not going to do any more so you can get what has been tasked done, and you're saying we need to communicate that up the chain?
I certainly would recommend that the executive, chief financial officer in this particular case, I would recommend that that individual literally either tell the controller or tell the grants people, we're done.
In effect, back him up.
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry for being slow, but that's what I thought, thank you.
I think I got it.
Okay?
Just,
So, we're gonna
just
take,
one
I'm
on
sorry.
my page, Bill, on
All of them, but I mean, basically what you're saying, there's someone's in charge of a grant, and they have a spreadsheet that tracks everything, and they think, oh, I should add a column for more information, and when they do that, it mucks everything
And
up. You're saying
we-
no more. you do
no
that
more
format
of that
exactly the
particular
same.
thing, and then they've assigned those kind of things as well. To each grant has all these fields that have to be laid out, how it gets funded, where the, all the different sources of information that everybody else needs to be able to do their job off of. And that's the point we're saying, that you've done all that. Now all you need to do is just make sure if you add a new grant, put it in that same format. But you don't get to go back and say, we're going to axe these 3 fields and I'm going to redo all this kind of stuff, because we don't have the ability of doing that anymore. That's what Zig is saying.
Okay, let's go to the next one. So we're gonna get a little detailed here. Just for your information, the team is using an automated tool to actually track all of the tests. And this just gives you an idea of all the various data elements that they assign and so forth. And they identify the description of what the test, or what the defect is, and then what should be done about it and so forth. What has happened in SIT 2, and this has a lot to do with SRM, okay, is that the SRM defects, many of the SRM defects have been categorized as functional user test category as opposed to SIT2 defect. SIT2 defects have to be fixed right away before you can go forward. Functional user testing defects kind of spring along a little bit, and they won't get resolved until you get to SIT3. So it's kind of pushing some of those purchasing defects down the road, kicking the can down the road a little bit. Next slide. So here are some examples. Purchase order is not being created off a shopping cart that is tied to a contract. An example. Cannot source a shopping cart to a purchase order. And then there's more text in here. They end up getting truncated. Per functional spec, it is required to get vendor name for P-cart transactions. Apparently it wasn't there. Okay. Those are examples. All 3 of those are categorized as an FUT, a functional user testing issue, which means that they are not required to be completed before the end of SIT2. They will be handled at SIT. It's just, I'm just highlighting the fact that we're kicking the can down the road on some things. Probably have to do that, otherwise SIT3 gets delayed quite a bit. Okay, let's go on. So what was holding up ECM? We just talked about this. I mean, so the other thing that was happening, we ran out of hours, but the other thing that's happening was reliant upon the role definitions. And the role mapping has been redone how many times?
I don't know how many times, but it took way longer than it should have.
We just finished role mapping. I mean, this is not all that complex conceptually, except for the fact that there's a lot of it, right? There's a lot of, about 3,000 individuals, which includes retirees. And I did count them. There are 134 roles in the system. And so literally, you gotta go through every person, you gotta say which role do you have.
And a role as a.
A role defines what you can do in the system. So it has a lot
Your
to-
permissions in the system.
Yes.
It's your access.
It's your access.
But it also determines what we're going to train you on, because
Yep.
OCM uses the roles to know what courses people have to take.
So, it's a driver. It's a driver for a lot of this other activity. But why it had to be redone several times, all I know is ECM. The reason ECM is held up for this is because they were going to tie licenses to the roles. And that turned into a dollar statement. And so now all of a sudden, instead of finalizing the ECM licensing, we're sitting there waiting for the roles. Make sense? Well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't make sense, but it happened. Let's put it that way. So we're.
Question? Zig? Okay. Go ahead, Zig.
You can say that again.
All right.
Licensing, so I thought roles were the permission in the system. What is licensing then? Is that-
Because what the role can do was going to define the license needs for HCM. Is this a person that does things only on catch-as-catch-can basis, or is this a person who is going to be dedicated to using HCM? And so you got into that issue of what those roles were, and that's why they needed to know what the final numbers were. Because this defines how many.
Anything else, Eric?
Well, just, Mr. Chairman, the CFO is here, and we went through that issue. I'm not sure how much time he has, but if we wanted to just address that issue of grants and the changes, so we can get clarity on that, it'd be an opportunity. But you're in charge of the meeting.
Fine.
Well, so I briefly brought up to him what we had mentioned just before he came here. I don't know if your ears were burning.
Yes, so I missed the talk, but I'm seeing the slide with respect to, being able to call enough is enough. I think that's certainly the effort that the project management team has been trying to accomplish, to be able to say, I had a conversation today with the controller about on the asset side, we're within $8, $9 of everything balancing. Great. AWW's within $1 million. Maybe not as great. So, we'll sort of take those cases on look at those
Case
cases
by
on a
case
case-by-case basis. But one of the things we've done on the operations side, and I can really speak to the operations side, I can't really speak to the project side, is thinking about this system after we go live. What do we have to have in order to be able to have a smooth functioning system that doesn't impact our ability to make payroll, to be able to get bills, pay them. And so we were looking for really that list of things that we absolutely have to have in order to take the system live, or recognizing that there's a potential vulnerability there that we have to, nurse it along for a little longer. So we're, certainly working with the project team to try to identify what those instances would be to, with respect to Zeke's comment there, that enough is enough. I'm always happy saying enough is enough, but the accountants then come in and say, where is it material? What is that level? And I think all of us, as we think about operations in post-go live world, we want to make sure that we're paying our people correctly. If anything, we're going to pay them $10 more per paycheck than less, because there are huge penalties for paying people $10 less. We want to make sure that we're paying our vendors, and that when people are able to continue to do projects, that we have a city to run, we want to make sure it runs well. But I don't know if I really addressed any of the things you guys talked about.
Anything else, Eric?
No.
Thanks.
Let's move on.
Go ahead.
So let's talk about project cost. You've seen this is just updated. Right now, you're averaging for the year, since January, 2,600 hours for the consultants every week. Now, I do think that that'll start dropping. Okay? If you look at the next slide again, this is the same one we had last month. I've just updated it. Your average since January 1, your average is almost $500,000 a week. Okay? And that now is up about 5,000 from last month. Now, again, if the consultant hours start dropping down, you should start seeing this number drop down a little bit as well over the next month or two. Okay? This is the same chart you saw a month ago, and there's been very little change. I mean, certainly the preponderance of your spending is on SAP, because the blue, red, and green are all SAP. Peloton is the other major contractor, and then you've got some small pieces over here. Okay? This I would like to spend a little time on. This is now a projection of what everything's going to cost. So this is the report that you received. These are numbers from the report you received from Alden in April. Most of these are coming from, I think all of these are coming from PeopleSoft. So that's what's officially in your books. This now column is the update as of 6/27 from PeopleSoft. So this is what's actually on the books. So you got about 62.8 on the books. Now, as you have heard, this is just the delta between the 2 months, but as you have heard, we haven't been paying SAP. a lot of inaccurate invoices. I think, Alden, you mentioned that with last month I had November on here, but now November's been paid. So this is what's in essence coming off of the weekly run sheets, because those are basically reporting time every week. So I accumulated all of those, and that's about what you've got in terms of incurred charges that probably will show up on invoices or have shown up on invoices from SAP, but they're not in PeopleSoft. So you're looking at an additional $10 million. That takes us up to 72 million. Okay? Estimated, just to take us to June, there's an estimate. Alden and I talked about this a little while ago. I'm assuming it hasn't changed. You see there's no change from April to June for internal charges. So there have been no charges since April for internal personnel. So the estimate back then was 650. It's probably still 650 of internal charges. But then we have to estimate from June until October. So I took a full month, so I just went to October 30th. And a couple of things we're using here is we're saying, okay, probably the weekly number will go from 455 down to 300 per week. So I use that to drive the numbers, okay? And we made an estimate, and Alden and I talked about this, probably another 500,000 in internal charges. Okay, and then you start multiplying the number of weeks, 16 times that number, and you get professional services will be that number, 4.8 million. Come down here, that's an additional 5.3 million. So somewhere along the line, somehow, I don't know what's going to happen, I don't know what administration is going to say, and I don't know what portion of it is going to necessarily be supported by SAP. They may support all of it. Then obviously the request of you would be zero. Or it'll be some portion of this or all. In order to finish, takes you to 78 million. 78.9, thank you, yes.
Just call it 80.
Well, I said that,
Let's call it 80
I said that
million.
2.5 years ago.
Yes, you did. Which heart failure when you said that, by the way.
What can I say? The numbers are there. Now, you can sit there and say, well, this number's gonna go down even more. I mean, obviously, if SAP walks off the project, you're not gonna be spending that. If Peloton does most of the work, they're 2/3 of the rate of SAP. So there's all kinds of possibilities there. I have no way of knowing what the administration is working and negotiating, and I'm sure a lot of it's going on right now since the SAP contract ends Friday. Tomorrow, Friday.
So Alden, where are we at now with SAP?
I have to leave here in 15 minutes to meet with the mayor and meeting with SAP all the rest of the afternoon. I would say that most of Zig's projections and so forth are pretty close to probably what the discussions are going on right now, and we're trying to come to a conclusion to figure out what happens at 5 o'clock tomorrow night.
We've already spent, allocated, reserved the 62.8, the 63, so we're talking about another 16 million.
But right now you have 75 million, a little over 75 million authorized and approved by the assembly. So he's just with his numbers and so forth there.
I mean, it's buried in here. A portion of this is authorized and a portion of it is not.
So
Yeah.
the little over 75 million was to get us through June 30th, and that's a pretty close number when you add all the 5 million in investment that we got as well from them. That's a pretty accurate number. But that was only through tomorrow night, and we run out of funding tomorrow night, and we are looking at an October go live right now. So there is that gap that we're looking
The
at.
other thing that will help you if you need to reconcile this is to recognize that this does not show any kind of investment from SAP. So I mean, in other words, the presumption here is anything that was a charge on a weekly consulting run rate, is spending. Now, if 5 million of it is basically provided free by SAP, that's not reflected here. Make sense? Okay. So I'm pretty comfortable with that number. I don't like it.
I'm not.
Well, nobody would like
Comfortable is not the right word.
Okay, maybe that's not the right word.
You may be accurate in your numbers.
Okay. Next page. So the project will require another 5 to 6 million to go to 10-1. The new system, we gotta remind ourselves, will not be 100%. It'll be more like 90 to 95. CAFR reports will not be tested. The 29 reports will probably not be tested. ER capabilities may not, the original scope included ER for ECM may not have been fully tested by the time we get to October. Okay? Administration should be making a funding request to you. Presumably, you're gonna get a funding request. When's the next meeting? The 11th? July 11th. So there'd be, theoretically, that would be what you'd be expecting to see. The amount of requests will be very dependent upon what they're able to negotiate.
Do a good job this afternoon.
Let's go. So the contracting, we've already talked about this. These contracts are expiring. I think Alden's got some ways to cover Peloton for a little while. Alaska IT will probably walk away and they'll be done. They'll move on to some other contracting approach. SAP we already talked about. SAP is working against the funding that was approved a few weeks ago to pay for prior efforts. That's what the $5 million is for, is all the things that they've been doing since when? April?
April 11th is when the realization
So
contract
that's what
started.
that money was for. Consultants have been instructed to cancel their travel plans. If they continue working, they will be working remote. Next week, this place will be empty of consultants. Is that a correct statement?
There won't be a single consultant on site next week,
Okay.
which it's 4th of July week too, so there's
Yeah.
a variety of complexities that go with that. We also were hedging whether we were going to get our data done. We now are going to get data done. We hand the system over to SAP. Takes 4.5 days, so it's a good week for them to be able to do that. And that work is not done by the consultants; it's done by IT people. So it made sense and so forth.
So let's move on. So we talked earlier. I'm just going to slide fairly quickly through the next page. Next page. And the next page. We talked earlier about why OCM has gotten better. So they've really got a better pace right now. So that's good news. But they need to pick up the pace on work instructions. Work instructions is still only at 13%. That's the documentation that literally sits on people's desks. That's the procedures.
And I'm adding more resources for them. That's why from July and August they're going to be able. They're getting extra people to help catch up even more. So but that's another reason why they're starting to look better. Is we're giving them the resources to be able to try to make it.
Okay. This was basically presented to you last month. I mean, OCM, most of the stuff in here is green. That's good. I do want to mention that they did lose a key person. As of this Friday, is that person gone?
Which person?
The one who's doing the scheduling.
She gave 2 weeks' notice. I'm still working. We're going to have to find a new scheduler, but she's here for 2 weeks.
Okay. So then I think there was some conversation about whether or not there was going to be a work session regarding municipal code changes being driven by the system. And the team has decided that there are none. Okay, there were.
We have a workshop set up at the request of the city manager. We don't need to have one, according to him.
Right.
So fine.
So just wanted to give you a reminder of how many policy changes. Now, these are policy changes. So 101 in the FILO area, finance and logistics, 15 in the human capital area. Most of these are in a review status, and most of them are residing, no surprise, in utilities, legal, and purchasing. Okay? So that's where they are. They all are to be approved by the mayor. Policy changes are supposed to be approved by the mayor.
So the PFMP changes in the manual.
I'm sorry?
The policy procedure manual changes are signed off by the mayor.
Right. So I think the only message here is this is 0. So none have gotten that far yet. Okay? SRM, there are 12 policy changes, but there are 8 process changes that were deemed by purchasing to not require municipal code change. Originally, they were. When the change impact study was done 3 or 4 or 5 months ago, they were, not now.
Can you give me an example of what that might be? What would
Sure, accepting electronic signature. Okay? Using a shopping cart. Automated purchasing type of thing. Yeah, those are.
The reason I asked the administration, specifically the city manager, are you sure you don't need code changes? He said, we don't need code changes. Fine. Ask the question, and don't come and tell me when this doesn't work, we didn't have code changes, because we gave you the opportunity to have a work session, do code changes.
But that's important to hear those examples, because it's not like, oh, this was an operating expense, we're gonna call it capital. It's not an accounting thing, it's just like, we should have shopping carts. We should
There's
have-
gonna be-
It's process
Water
changes.
systems too.
I mean, there's no question it's process changes. Go to the next page, and here's some specific examples, okay?
Just a second, hold on.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're going to be accepting electronic signatures, and we don't need a legal change, D?
You can do it by policy as well, unless there's something in the code that says you can't do this, and our new policy runs afoul of that, then it's much better in a policy, because policies are much easier to modify. So all the legal review will be, is there something there that prohibits something that touches here, or does it speak to the large of the public? But these are all internal.
All right, thanks.
Okay, here's an example. After the department approval, shopping carts may automatically create a purchase order if the cart meets a certain criteria. Example, existing contract under $50,000, non-contract under $5. Process change. Okay, those are examples, very specific, they're in the spreadsheet, and they have been deemed as not requiring municipal code change. Just so you know. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the outlook. You've seen my famous, I don't know if that's a wolf or a dog. What do you think?
I know, it doesn't move much, so it could be still.
It's in the same spot every time. Okay, let's go on. So some commentary. The morale of the Muni personnel regarding this project is diving. It's diving. Okay, it's not good. Project team must continue to look for ways to boost the morale and confidence levels. Okay, it's really not a good. It's not a good thing. And moving everybody, I don't know how much impact that'll have. The team should be over communicating with MOA. This is not a time to sit back and say, let's stop, we don't have time, higher priorities. I mean, all those things are going to happen. As far as I'm concerned, you need to be out there beating the drum. You need to be communicating. Because there's a degree of uncertainty regarding the need for personnel continues to be an issue. Continues to be an issue. How many times, you're over here, how many times have you requested that information from SAP? Give me a number.
Many.
And I have said in functional steering committee meetings when people say, when are you going to need my people and for how much? When? And then functional steering committee members get very uptight and very upset when on a Friday they're told, oh, by the way, your people need to work this week. That's not a good thing.
We have 7 minutes left in this work session, by the way.
Okay, let's go.
By the way, I tried to resolve that problem by telling everybody to work the next 6 weekends in a row, and that didn't go over very well. So that over-communication didn't work as I had planned.
So a couple of key questions, these are questions I think obviously for Alden.
Good job.
Will SAP work at risk next week? I mean, they've done it once, the question is will they do it again? Okay? Can you find enough bridge funding to take care of keeping people going? That's in Alden's hands. I know he's got some pools of funding someplace. And then can you keep the resources focused? Very important questions. Let's go on. I have a series, what's looking beyond. I just want to repeat these. I've said this before. Let's go ahead. It will not be perfect. There will be work that goes on beyond go live. And it will. No, you just have to accept that fact. Okay? And here's the list. And we've talked about these before. For instance, P-cards, Universe. Okay? Those are all going to happen afterward. Let's go on. I showed you this list before. I've added 2 things. Because if you recall, I said those 29 reports won't get tested. Okay? And then the CAFR reports won't get tested. I don't know, contractually, this is gonna be a fun one, because I'm pretty sure that's gonna happen after go live, and it's in the contract. The SAP contract is supposed to provide 10 CAFA reports. Okay, let's go on. Just wanted you to know that from a OCM or a change management perspective, there's a recognition, there's quite a bit of things that need to happen and need to continue happening with regard to change management. That's not only is it the completion of training, because if you recall, only 2/3 of the training is going to actually get done before go live. That's planned, that's what everybody decided and agreed upon. That means the last third has to get done. Okay? And certainly you've got some year-end, quarter-end kinds of things going on that are obviously after go live. Okay? So I've got some recommendations. Started talking about these last month. So you gotta finish. You've gotta finish. So complete all the development, complete the functional testing, complete the interface testing, complete all the training as planned, except less than perfect on the master data, that's grants. Okay? Start collecting time on 9/11. The key thing everybody needs to understand with that start date is that the entire system has to be there on 9/11, not 10/1. 9/11. So the time when the actual functioning environment needs to be in place, and the team knows this, but it's just a matter of the way things have been presented. It's got to be when people start collecting time, because they're going up against.
Otherwise, you can't pay them on 10/1 because you didn't have the 2 weeks.
You didn't have all the information necessary. You got to go in. When that comes in and it says, "Here's my number. Here are my hours," I got to go against the master file and say, "Oh, I exist." Right? The employee's got to be there. And the accounts have to be there.
3 minutes left.
Okay?
Well, the good news is it's not happening on Friday the 13th.
That's right. But it is, however, unfortunately, 9/11.
No.
Okay, let's go on. So I think we should establish Synergy 2. Don't call it SAP Project Part 2, call it Synergy. That was your original name. Stay away from SAP. Stay away from SAP. Establish a project to take care of those items that still need to be done. And if you establish it as a project, you capitalize it. It's not out of operating, okay? You don't have to worry about SAP. You can if you want to. You can use others. Okay, it gives you plenty of flexibility there. Let's go on. Also, establish a stabilization period. This is when you turn to your IT department and say, okay, take over and support this. That's what this is. That's what that is all about. Okay? Recognize that you accept the changes, accept that you will have changes for at least a year. Okay? Continue your change management focus. Continue training. Don't just stop training. Have renewal training. Have new employee training. You've got to keep moving with that stuff. Otherwise, you'll end up exactly where you were when people didn't know how to use the system 2 years down the road. And the new people didn't know how to use it either. Okay? Continue over-communicating. Transition, IT's got a PMO team, transition to them, let them go. It's their thing. And then provide some resources you probably are going to end up contracting. Okay? Next slide. Last month we talked about what the different kinds of audits were. One was a cost audit, the other was a performance audit, just recommending that you do it. And there's the cost audit definition and the cost audit objectives. I think you can sole source your current external auditor. Don't even have to go to an RFP. Okay? Next. Performance audit. Same kind of thing. We talked about what that was. I think you ought to do it. Probably have to go with an RFP because your external auditor really probably doesn't have the resources to do that. Okay? And then we've reached those hands again.
Questions for Assembly members?
John, just a quick one. So we're running out of funding because the Assembly has to approve funding, but we knew this was delayed for quite a long time. Why is there this gap?
It's not the administration.
We didn't get the investment figured out with them until about 3 weeks ago. It took 3 extra months longer to be able to do that. We didn't know where we were going to end up, so rather than bringing a request to the Assembly without any background or knowledge, we wanted to make sure we knew what was going on. Unfortunately, then, because it took so long, it's left us a very short period of time to run around and try to figure out how we're going to bridge that gap to be able to do that. In addition to that, it provides us an opportunity for negotiations always to get the best deal we can for the municipality of Anchorage. If they knew you had funding already assigned
Then
2
we
months ago,
negotiate.
they're not going to talk to you. So it's unfortunate, but there is some strategy behind it as well.
Dick, can I ask another question?
Of course.
Alden, I remember that those negotiations turned on a couple of key provisions. And I think you already told us what they were, but one was had to do with litigation. Is that right?
The real issue that lasted several months was they wanted release language that said that we would never sue them.
And did they get that?
No.
Okay.
But it took 3 months to get back to the beginning.
You do not
That would
want
have
to
to
give up
come
on
to
that.
assembly, I think, all for us to agree to that, and that.
So
Just
that,
letting you know. We're not going another road, that happened with Black and Beach.
What, you mean not
Yeah.
taking away our right to sue them?
Yeah. Ain't happening. Any other questions with Cindy, This means over, thanks for being here. Thank you, Alden.
Thanks for your time. See you in a month.
So just
Bet.